There we go. Computer does weird things when I try to code. I'm continuing to read from Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington, and I got this book because there is a distrust um, from some in this society of the medical industry, and I think we need to know why. Uh, so let's continue reading. Soon life began to imitate Hazelden's art. German doctors became obsessed with regaining an imaginary Nordic purity even before the 1933 rise of Hitler and National Socialism. But U.S. national eugenics policies had employed unconscionable medical violations against those they considered unfit, including blacks, since 1910. The lines of American and German eugenics were united not only by a shared vision of racial purity, but also by the International Society for Racial Hygiene. Sorry about the noise, but we're in the hood. It's the way it is. Uh, Chief among its American members were mathematicians and biologist Charles Davenport, PhD, who established the Station for Experiment Evolution, SEE, and in 1910 the privately funded and seminal Eugenics Record Office, ERO, at Cold Spring Harbor on Long Island, New York, which joined with the sea in 1920 under the aegis of the Carnegie Institution. Davenport was fascinated by biometrics and quantitative study of evolution. Under him, the ERO conducted research on human heredity by means of numerically mapping human traits, collecting large amounts of eugenic data from scientists and physicians who shared their patients' family and medical histories. The ERO also informed popular and legal opinion concerning eugenics, as when Davenport's deputy, Harry Hamilton Laughlin, provided the extensive statistical research that proved essential to the National Origins Act of 1924. It barred immigrants from Southern and Eastern European countries as dysgenic. The ERO was so indispensable to the prestige of eugenic science that when Carnegie withdrew its funding support on December 31st, 1939, its closing marked the official end of the eugenics era. Laughlin, who was also head of the SEE, worried in print that no two races had ever maintained their purity while living in as close proximity as U.S. blacks and whites did. In 1910, he published a research study of the skin colors that resulted from black-white matings. Predictably, warm relations reigned between American eugenicists and the Germans, who shared Laughlin's abhorrence of black-white mating. In 1933, Davenport's Eugenical News praised the German race hygiene movement and published abstracts of articles from German eugenics journals such as Archiv für Rassien and I can't pronounce this word, um, Gesellschaftsbiologie. Laughlin shared detailed information about eugenics sterilization in the United States with Eugene Fischer, director of Berlin's Kaiser Wilhelm Institute für Anthropologie. I don't know why I'm saying it like French. Anthropology. Um, Menschliche Erbler and Eugenique, Institute for Anthropology, Human Genetics, and Eugenics. In gratitude, Heidelberg University awarded Laughlin an honorary Doctor of Medicine degree in 1936. Although their cruel acts of genocide were primarily directed against Jews and white Europeans, National Socialists also considered any admixture with people of African descent intolerable. For example, the Rhineland bastard were the offspring born during the 1920s of German women and French Somalian soldiers who were stationed in the Rhineland during its post-World War I occupation. It's a whole big history about that. It's really interesting. The Reichsbahnführer Richard Walter Dare declared as a Rhinelander, "I demand sterilization for all mulattoes with whom we were saddled by the black shame of the Rhine." German hereditary health courts judged the reproductive fitness of poor and ill Gentiles on a case-by-case basis, but for blacks and Afro-Germans, visual or verbal evidence of African ancestry was enough to justify immediate secret sterilization in on-site clinics under Special Commission Number 3, which was devised by Eugene Fisher in 1937. For example, Frankfurt Health Office records for June 19, 1937 note, the German citizen Joseph Feck, born on 26 September 1920 and residing in Mainz, is a descendant of the former colonial occupation troops North Africa and distinctly displays the corresponding anthropological characteristics. For that reason, he is to be sterilized. His mother consents to the sterilization. We don't know if that's true about his mom or not. Upon demand, or maybe she said, let us sterilize him or we kill the whole family, who knows. Upon demand, Afro-German men had to produce health documents certifying that they had been sterilized. And although the sterilization of at least 385 children is well documented, an entire generation of Afro-Germans was robbed of its fertility. However, Nazi eugenicists frequently observed that their laws to bar Jewish Aryan mating were more liberal than were American laws to separate people of African descent from the white genetic pool. Germans held that a person who was 1/4 Jewish was a legal Aryan and thus fit to marry a German, but parallel marriages and mating between whites and blacks were illegal in much of the United States, and in effect punishable by death, lynching. The one-drop laws of many southern states counted anyone who had even 1/32nd African heritage as black. Other laws, such as the 1924 Virginia Racial Integrity Act, denominated anyone with any Negro blood at all as black. Editors of German medical journals learned a great deal about eugenics prescription by studying American medical journals, whose charts precisely detailed which racial mixtures were tolerable in marriages to whites, who was white enough to vote, and so on. In fact, a cordial rivalry characterized the relationship between German and American eugenicists. The Germans are beating us at our own game, Virginia eugenicist Dr. Joseph S. Dijonet sighed in thinly veiled admiration during the 1934 speech in which he urged the Virginia legislature to expand its sterilization laws. However, eugenics initiatives, like much of the unethical racial experimentation in the United States, suffered from more than one moral flaw. They were simply illogical. There are several reasons why any experiments in improving health and purifying racial stock by removing certain tainted individuals from the populations will fail to root out the unwanted genes. But scientists had known of at least one since 1917. Before the advent of genetic screening tests, one had only classic Mendelian genetics to rely on, and one could determine whether a person was a carrier of a genetic taint only by the health of his children. Too late for eugenics measures to prevent breeding. English geneticist P.C. Punnett had determined by 1917 that eugenic steps to prevent the reproduction of people exhibiting disease symptoms would fail to detect so many carriers that they would be rendered useless. This knowledge made eugenic strategies and goals scientifically invalid as well as morally repugnant. So, it's an excellent book. Everybody needs to have it on your shelf. and study it. Um, I don't have too much more to say. The proof is in the reading. Until next time, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and be safe.